Morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I wanted to just do a quick introduction. Like Caitlin said, that was a nice introduction from Caitlin. I appreciate the nice words she said. So she mentioned that I was a VISTA. I served in 2006 with a child advocacy organization, and then I was able to be hired by that organization. So I've been in the nonprofit or public sector. I worked for state government for just a short time since 2006. So I've been lucky enough to been in the same role that Caitlin's been in, running an AmeriCorps and program at a different organization, and then got to join Caitlin here at HHCK about a year and a half ago in a development role. So I'm excited to be here with you all today. I'm going to, once we get going, I'm going to turn my video off because I tend to move around when I start talking. But before we get started, if you all wouldn't mind to either, I'm going to turn my video off now, but if you all wouldn't mind to tell me in the chat box where you're located, like what your site is, that would be helpful for me so that as I'm going through our presentation today, I can maybe refer back to your site, or maybe I've got some experience with your site, or whatever it may be. So if we can, we're a small group today, so I'm hoping that we can have a little bit of interaction. I know that being on a computer is a little bit weird, doesn't provide for a whole lot of interaction, but maybe we can do a little bit today. So we've got United Way over in Paducah. We've got Arbor Youth in Lexington, Fahy in Berea, Bethany Haven in Bardstown, Emergency Shelter in Covington. Does that hit everybody? I'm not a math specialist, so if that's everyone, then I'm going to share my screen and hope that we let me get to my correct where I need to be before I share my screen. Okay. Maybe. Okay. Now I've lost my. Can everybody see my presentation? Okay. I've cut
Looks
myself off.
good.
Okay, good. Okay, so today we're talking about fundraising, and I hope you like my play on words because it's so much fun. Yay. And because we're a small group, I'd welcome you all to just interrupt me. I think if you type in the chat box, it might pop up, but from my view, I'm seeing my whole screen is just the what is this called? A PowerPoint, just the PowerPoint presentation. So, but please feel free to interrupt me with any questions you might have. The last presentation I did, the chat box was really lagged. So if you want to just pop in and just speak, then you're not going to bother me to interrupt me at any time. So today I'm hoping to for you to take away. I'm going to make an assumption, and if anybody wants to correct me and tell me that I'm completely 100% wrong, please feel free to do that. That today is a kind of just a 101 basics, but I am also going to do that with thinking that you might not be brand new to doing some fundraising and some development things. If you've been in the nonprofit sector for any time, if you've been a volunteer, if you've done a fundraiser for as just a citizen, then you have been exposed to fundraising. So, but today, my goal for you to take away from this presentation or training is to understand the different types of fundraising, the importance of goal setting, providing solutions to problems, utilizing resources that you already have in your community. A community is a pretty broad term. So, community can be as small as your workspace or as large as your county or the area that you're serving, which can be a lot larger than your county or city. Learn about new resources that you can put into work for you. Don't do it all on your own. Utilize what's already there. Don't reinvent the wheel. Um, Fundraising is a team sport. You don't have to do everything on your own. And the last bullet point that I would emphasize over and over again is that you don't have to be great at everything. There are different roles, there's different staff. There You're going to learn this year, if it's your first year as a VISTA, that it's a growing year. It's a time for you to learn about what you're good at, what you like, what you don't like, and what you might want to pursue as a longer term interest or longer term career goals. It's really what I was able to do as a Vista. And I'm not going to come back to that a lot because everybody's different. Everybody's utilizing this year for different things. But just to share a little bit about where I came from and how I ended up where I am. So, first, I'm going to ask a question if anybody's brave enough to answer. When you've told folks that you're doing a year of Vista and you're going to do some fundraising or you're going to do some development, has anybody kind of just lumped you in with that title at the top that you're going to do grants and you're going to do development, you're going to do communications, you're going to do fundraising? Has anybody gotten that response or expectation or assumption?
I haven't had too many assumptions. People haven't really said a whole lot.
Okay. Thank you for answering. Anybody else have any thoughts or want to share? And if
Yeah,
anybody's
I
okay,
may
sorry,
be
go
in the
ahead.
minority, but I don't really have a whole lot of fundraising experience in any official capacity.
Okay, thank you. So, and if anybody else wants to hop in, please feel free. I think what what I do see a lot, or what I have seen noticed in the nonprofit sector, is that these three positions or categories kind of all tend to get lumped in together. So, grant writing and development and communications, a lot of organizations try to have the same person or the same people do all three things. And I'm going to go down to the bottom of the page first and say that all of these are related and they work best when they work together, but these three categories aren't the same. So, if you're somebody that loves to write and you really like to research where money can come from and how other organizations, when I say other organizations, I mean other money having organizations, so foundations, government entities, how they can support you, then you might discover that grant writing is something that you really enjoy. It can sometimes be a tedious process. It doesn't always have to be. Um, the definition that is on your screen there is just the real cut and dry. It's the practice of completing an application process for a financial grant provided by an institution. There are classes you can take to become a better grant writer. There are courses that you can take at colleges and universities. There are tons of resources out there that you can seek out to learn how to research the foundations and the government entities that can best support your organizations. So that's one piece of the financial support systems for your organization. So development, uh, it's another piece. It again, the definition here is just the sterile definition. Raise funds for various philanthropic efforts. Pretty broad. Um, and development kind of encompasses everything that's outside of grant writing. Uh, then what I put communications at the bottom because it's hard to have those first two if you don't have that third piece. But you might notice that folks who may be good at grant writing or good at seeking out funders for an event for fundraising might be terrible at communications, or you might discover that somebody who's really good at communications that can do this definition here. Sorry, I skipped over the definition. Any communication that takes place between a nonprofit and its audience. Somebody that does really great at that piece isn't so great at those other two pieces. So I just wanted to kind of preface that sometimes I think in our sector, in the nonprofit sector, that these three things do get lumped in together, and that there's an expectation that you're good at all three and you can do all three and you can juggle all three. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes people are great at all three of these things. But back to that, back to our objectives, you don't have to be great at every little thing. And that's especially true during your year as a VISTA. You're learning. I'm hoping that you'll get exposure to all of these things this year. But I think if there were one thing that if I had known in my first year, kind of my first foray into the nonprofit sector, if I had realized that these things are great when they're working together well, but they're not the same, that would have been really helpful. Does anybody have any questions or comments or clarifications if you've been doing this stuff for a little bit? Anything to add?
I have no questions.
Awesome. Anybody else? And I'm not seeing the chat, so if anybody's in the chat box, can somebody tell me if there are chats in there?
I don't have any questions, but I'm definitely excited to learn and get more knowledgeable about the whole process.
Awesome. Thank you. That's a perfect attitude to have for the beginning of the year.
I think it's really pretty overwhelming.
Well, that's an okay feeling to have too, because it can feel like you're about to learn a whole lot and there's a lot to take in. And so that's perfectly acceptable too. But I'm confident that you're going to have resources and tools available to you that will make it feel less overwhelming as you get into things. Okay. So to bring it kind of back a little bit, maybe this will start to feel less overwhelming. To bring it down a little bit, talking about goals first. So I think I like to think about problems, but connecting them to solutions. So we're going to talk about your VAD. So you've got your VAD, and you should kind of be referring back to this, hopefully with your supervisor as you're going through the year. And if you're in a position where you are supervised by somebody who's in a development role, then you might see that your supervisor is really bringing it back to fundraising pretty frequently. If you're not, then it might be a little bit different. But these are some things that are kind of problem solution oriented. So if your VAD is set up like this, and I've not seen anybody's VAD, so I don't know exactly what your goals are for the year. But if you refer to your VAD and you look at what some of the goals are on your VAD, so the first bullet, does your organization lack visibility? So does your community understand why you're there? Are you can you say your organization's name, and the somebody that's walking down the street, they're like, yeah, I know I know what Fahi does. They help folks get housed. If you're in Bardstown and you tell somebody that you work at, that you're serving at Bethany Haven, and they say, "Oh, I know exactly where they are, and I know how many folks that they've helped over the past several years that they've been here," then you don't really have a problem with lack of visibility. But if they don't know who you are, then how can fundraising help that problem? If your organization needs new equipment, if you are, and equipment is a really broad term. Equipment can be computers, it can be a vehicle to help transport folks to and from appointments, or construction equipment. It can be very, very small up to very big. How can fundraising help solve that problem? If you are an organization that really thrives on membership, if you have members who pay fees to help with your budget, how can fundraising help that problem? Again, I don't know what your VAD looks like, but these were things that came to mind as I was thinking of problems that fundraising could help solve. So I would encourage you, as your year goes on, to look at your VAD and try to connect it to problems and solutions. So if you bring a problem to the table, and not literally, just in your mind, think about how trying to become more problem solution oriented and keeping goals in mind. And if you're somebody that likes to write things down, which I am, I like to write things down, check them off a list, and keep moving forward. So you'll have this presentation afterwards, and I'm hoping that it will be helpful to refer back to remember to go back to your VAD as the year goes on. So I wanted to challenge you a little bit with this slide. I know that a couple of folks have said that they're a little pretty brand new to fundraising and development in general. So, but maybe you've already noticed that you see a lot of fundraising centered around donors. So we put them at the center and we thank them and we really organize around a donor. But there's a little bit of a shift in the fundraising world to be a little more centered around the community that you're fundraising for. So community-centric fundraising is an organization that's based in Seattle. So you're thinking, well, why are you talking about an organization that's not anywhere near Kentucky? What on earth does Seattle have to do with Kentucky? But the folks that are leading community-centric fundraising are some real kind of just leaders in the fundraising world that have the best intentions for how to move organizations forward in a holistic way. So I've left the website there, and I think I can, let's see if I can go to it real quick. Yeah, I already had it pulled up. So I'm just going to look at it really quick if we can, if it's going to cooperate. I wonder if, okay. So I wanted to just show you the principles, if we can get there. Maybe. Okay. So again, if you're brand new to fundraising, then you could just start fresh with this. But understand that this is challenging, maybe even in an organization that has never heard of this type of movement, I guess. But these are the 10 principles. So fundraising must be grounded in race, equity, and social justice. Individual organizational missions are not as important as the collective community. Nonprofits are generous with and mutually supportive of one another. All who engage in strengthening the community are equally valued, whether volunteer, staff, donor, or board member. Time is valued equally as money. We treat donors as partners, and this means that we are transparent and occasionally have difficult conversations. We foster a sense of belonging, not othering. We promote the understanding that everyone, donors, staff, funders, board members, volunteers, personally benefits from engaging in the work of social justice. It's not just charity and compassion. We see the work of social justice as holistic and transformative, not transactional. And we recognize that healing and liberation requires a commitment to economic justice. So those are a lot of words, but I think that they have a lot of real meaning behind them. Does anybody have any thoughts on any of those principles? Do they sound like they're a lot of fluff? Does it feel like they mean something? Does it make you feel better about the concept of fundraising? Does it make you feel more connected, less connected? Any thoughts?
Well, I agree with all the philosophy behind it.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan. I can see the chat box now that I've come out of my presentation mode. Anybody else?
I like the fact that it mentions it's not just charity and compassion, but it's the actual work that really drives it forward.
Yeah, yeah. I think we sometimes in the nonprofit sector kind of get lost in that message a little bit. I think for maybe for some folks who have been in the nonprofit sector for a long time, have maybe gotten tied up with only focusing on their organization and have forgotten about the whole community. And I think that's what I really like about it, is that it makes you think about other organizations and how everybody is connected. And if one organization is thriving who focuses on, maybe housing, but another organization who focuses on food accessibility is failing, then that's not a successful. That's not good. That it takes the whole community being successful for it to be again just a holistic approach. I think somebody may have been trying to say something, so I'll.
It's Carla. Good morning.
Hi, Carla.
I agree with you in terms of the organizations. Many times they focus on what they're doing, and it's always wonderful to communicate. Going back, it ties into visibility. And most times, if an organization did not come up with an idea or didn't create this thing, is like, I'm not going to support it, and sometimes they don't take the time to understand what your program is, especially if they're in a larger capacity and you are just starting off. So that has been the greatest problem. But looking at this slide, it kind of opened up a lot of stuff to what we really need to understand about this.
Yeah, that's a great point. Especially for, like you said, like some smaller organizations that are just starting out. They've seen kind of a hole that needs to be filled where nobody's filling it, and they can sometimes benefit from another organization, maybe not taking them in, but just helping to promote some of the things they're doing, and that can be really beneficial for, again, the entire community. Another thing I like is that it doesn't kind of put, and this is something that I think can feel really foreign to folks that have been in this mindset of really donor centric. It doesn't put donors on this big pedestal. We're putting we're trying to get everyone kind of in a place, in a space, in a place where they're equally valued. So that includes staff, board members, volunteers, everyone. We're not giving all this power to donors because we want to recognize that everything is valued equally, and that's a challenge, I think, in the nonprofit sector. So something interesting, and I'm going to pop back over to our presentation here. Oops. Now, I guess I can just stay in this mode. It like the slide says that a lot of organizations are still going to be donor centric, and that's probably okay. But I think we'll continue to kind of see this shift, whether organizations realize it or not, that they're probably shifting to a more community centric mode and model, because we're seeing across the board more participation and more collaboration with organizations that nonprofits maybe just didn't do before, and we'll talk a little bit more about why maybe that is in a couple more slides. But no matter what maybe school of thought your organization is working within, communication is still key no matter what. Communication within your organization, communication within your organization and another organization, with your donors, with your board members, with your volunteers, with your other staff members. That's going to always be so important and something that you just can't skimp on. When everybody understands one another, is on the same page, that's when things are most successful. When folks feel supported and feel like they're really contributing, then things are a lot easier. Any other thoughts before we move on? So just a few facts about fundraising. I'm going to pop over and show you another website, but you'll have these links again after we finish today. So I wouldn't think this would be surprising. And I'll also say, let's take this with that this last year and a half was very unexpected, and the way that folks gave was different. We may have seen trends that were in line or out of line, just depending on how COVID affected the way folks gave. So online fundraising is increasing. I wouldn't have expected that to be any other way. Online fundraising is easy. Folks have the ability to give online. It's easy, it's quick, it's convenient, it's at your fingertips for the most part. For a lot of folks who tend to give in the demographics I'm going to show you, and it's up 20% in the last year. We know that the demographics of donors are changing, and that's that's probably been said for the last 20 years. Demographics are always going to be changing, but does anybody have any idea of how they're changing? Any thoughts? Any guesses?
I would guess it's a lot more of the younger population that's engaging with fundraising.
Yeah, that's a good guess. I'm gonna read that last little bullet, and then I'm gonna pop over and show you some of those stats. So the average gift made online is $177, and that's I pulled that just from the same source that showed us that online fundraising is increasing. But I think that if you were to talk to some of our local organizations, the average gift made online is a lot smaller than that. That $177 for organizations, depending on their budget, that can seem really small. If you go to a larger organization where they have a huge budget, that can, I may have said that backwards. An organization that has a small budget, $177 is really big. If an organization has a large budget, average online gift of $177 is really small. So don't let that sway you if you are about to be in a position at your site, and you've got some goals to. I'm getting some feedback. Somebody's wanting to hop in. I'll shut up for a second if somebody's wanting to hop in.
Oops, sorry about that. One of the things that I can always look at, even though this is an average gift amount, all of the smaller gifts can mount to what you are looking for. So average 177, but you have a lot of people giving like $20, $10, and those could always mount up. So I don't ever feel disappointed when you do a fundraiser and you see the small amounts coming in.
Absolutely, yes. And those small gifts, they add up, right? You see those coming in, and they, if you've got 10 people that give even $5, or and maybe this year they give $5, but next year they give $20, and then the fourth or fifth year they have decided that they've supported your organization for 4 or 5 years, and well, I've only given $5 or $10 the past few years. I think this year I'm in a better place financially. I think I can really support the organization with a lot more. I can add it to my budget. I can support this organization better. But I'll share a little inside, um, something that has always stuck with me from someone that I had the I guess I hate to say privilege of meeting, because I think it was I think I would consider this person a friend, but they're a professional fundraiser. They ended up starting their own consulting company and have been very successful in their business. And it has always stuck with me that those $5 and $10 donations year after year after year are the ones, versus the one-time $1,000 donations. That one-time $1,000 donation feels really good at the time, but those continuous year after year after year small donations, those are the folks who are really in tune with your mission. Those are the folks who really care about you, you as your organization. And those are the folks you want to spend time on, because eventually, when they do feel like they can give more, they will. If you communicate with them, if you invest your time in them, if you show them that what they're giving to really matters and is important and is making an impact, then that's what's really important. So let me say that again a little more succinctly. So the one-time $1,000 donation is great. You want to thank that donor, but you don't want to forget about those over and over again donors who are giving smaller amounts. Don't forget to thank them. Don't forget to let them know that they're valued too, because eventually they might give the big bucks too. It's not all about money. They might have other things to give too, but wanted to share that with you. And we got off a little bit. So let me get back to this. I think I've got this one pulled up. Excuse me. Okay, so the demographics for nonprofits. Here are some current demographics. So some of these titles I'm not a big fan of, but here we go. So our younger demographics, 25, well, almost 30% of the population, 40% are enrolled in monthly giving. I don't want to read all this to you. But I wanted to highlight a few things that I thought were a little striking. Also, these are not, I realize that that this is from 2017, so not super, a couple of years old. Let's see. So you got 84% of millennials giving to charity. Gen Xers. So 49% enrolled in a monthly giving, and up here it was 40%. So you got more enrolled in monthly giving. That's okay. That's probably to be expected. So 19% giving through Facebook. I wanted to compare a few. 16% giving through Facebook for millennials. So interesting how we see the different demographic and how they give on Facebook. So anyway, I don't want to go through all of these, but here are just some good ways to see how the breakdown of stats and how different generations are giving. The trend, though, is that younger folks are giving, they're just giving in smaller amounts, and they feel more compelled to give than the folks who are older, did not give at the younger age like our folks who are now. So back to that kind of cultivation. If you cultivate now, then you're cultivating for later. And I feel like every time I want to talk like that, I feel like I'm sounding like a greedy, money hungry kind of person about your nonprofit, and that doesn't feel like community centric fundraising. But you're also cultivating for time, for board membership. You might let them know that, I don't know, maybe you find out that they're not the best fit for your organization, and you can send them on to another organization in your community that they might be a better fit for. Any questions about some of the facts of fundraising? I know I kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent there, but I'll get us back on track now. Okay. So we kind of started talking about this a little bit, but types of fundraising. So obviously there's monetary, and there's different ways of doing monetary fundraising. So online, that we've talked about a little bit. So I'm assuming that everybody's at their site, and you've probably perused your website, your social media pages. Maybe you've seen some promotions that your sites have done for planned days of giving, whether it's like through the Giving Tuesday, or another organization that does a day of giving. Any thoughts, any feedback on, does that feel like it's
Um, I have something
yeah.
I want to touch on. So last Friday we did Project United, and it was basically they had partnership with different organizations throughout Paducah, doing various projects in the community. A lot of them were for low income families, whether it was painting, doing flooring. Ourselves personally, we had overseen one firm giving out food to the workers. I just noticed it wasn't a lot of diversity as far as the volunteers, and how could I bring that to my organization as a way to broaden the diversity in the community, being they are targeting lower income families, how to get them more involved. Because they were doing a lot of things that were building skills, power washing, cutting grass, a lot of things outdoors they were doing, but I didn't see a lot of diversity as far as the volunteers.
Okay. So you're wondering how your organization could recruit just a more diverse volunteer base to be more reflective of the folks that are being served? Is that okay?
Yes. Yes.
That's a good question. So let's pop down to the non-monetary type of fundraising. So volunteers is our first bullet point there. So I'm not super familiar with how large your organization is and kind of what the staff looks like, and I'm a little familiar with kind of what the makeup is of Paducah and kind of that Western Kentucky area. Is the footprint, so is it only serving Paducah, or is it all of McCracken County?
All of McCracken County.
Okay, perfect.
We had students from UK that were doing work. We had Paducah Housing Authority that was doing work, a couple of CPA firms, CSI was doing work. But again, it just wasn't a lot of diverse.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It was a little bit weird.
Yeah. That's I think your frustrations would probably be echoed by a lot of nonprofits in probably our statewide area. That volunteers and board members, because board members are volunteers too, are not reflective of the population being served. I think I would probably say that that's been echoed probably at most of the few nonprofits that I've worked at. It's difficult. So when you're looking for volunteers that match your demographic being served, where do you go? So who do you go? I'm gonna turn this around and say, can you go into your neighborhoods and can you put flyers out? Can you advertise on your going back up to our website, social media
I'm
pages?
totally open to the idea of doing that. Just getting people more involved. They want to see change, but we have to be the change we want to see as well.
Right. So, and you're hiring too. So you're wanting to show that you are reflective of your community in your organization too. So there are, I don't know who would do like a volunteer or a board member training in the Paducah area, like in Central Kentucky area. It's the Kentucky Nonprofit Network. We'll talk about in a minute. But a lot of times there are opportunities to actually. I feel like this Owensboro might do the community college over there might do a board training. So you might get board members who go through a board training that is specifically for the BIPOC community that trains board members how to be a good board member and then get recruited to be part of nonprofits. So board members are volunteers too. And you can get board members to then they are going to be your best recruiters for other volunteers. Colleges are oftentimes good places to recruit volunteers. Fraternities and sororities have to do so many service hours if they're not already connected to a nonprofit. Even if they are, they don't. That doesn't mean that they're going to meet their kind of quota of service hours. I wish I was a little bit more familiar with Western Kentucky. If there are other folks on the call who are familiar with Western Kentucky and kind of what groups are there to recruit volunteers from.
One of the greatest support that I have gotten over the years is with the church.
That's a good point. Yeah. Churches provide lots of volunteer opportunities. Have churches been something that are an area that have been an opportunity to recruit volunteers from?
I can't.
Not currently. I'm sorry.
I just
Not currently, but I thank you guys for your feedback.
I contacted the churches in the area about putting an insert in their church bulletin. And then the insert that I wrote was, that we were looking for volunteers and what we were looking for. And most of the churches, the majority of the churches that had bulletins said yes. And so I just emailed it to them and they inserted it in their bulletins.
Okay. Yeah. And sorry, go ahead, Carla.
Sorry, Whitney. With the church, it's also good to understand, and like we said earlier on, in terms of visibility. you just don't want to just show up and ask the church. So sometimes you just want to get involved. I'm not saying to get converted to the church, but sometimes you have to go the extra mile and just visit and understand the community that you're in. I might be of one religion and don't want to participate in another, but you want to drop that banner sometimes and say, hey, we're all a part of this community, and there's Catholics, Christian, whoever. And you just want to just, show up sometimes and just say, hi, we're in the neighborhood, that type of thing. And I have gotten great responses in terms of the youth department, not so much the entire church, but the youth have supported a lot of the programs that I have done. So that might be a good idea.
Thank you guys.
Awesome. And I would encourage you to keep in communication with your fellow VISTA members, and see what other feedback there that might be working for them as they get into their sites, and see where their volunteers are coming from. There might be some things that they're learning as they get in, and maybe don't have great feedback to be able to offer now because they don't know it yet. So thank you for asking that and making us think about resources that we have access to or don't have access to yet. Okay, so types of fundraising, direct mail fundraising. I'm going to venture to guess that most of your organizations are probably doing some kind of direct mail fundraising. And this just means like maybe at holiday time, you might do like a happy holidays card and ask for an end of year monetary gift or a way to support folks that you're serving with a Christmas card or a donation, maybe like an Amazon wish list or something like that. So that's what direct mail means. Maybe you do it in the middle of the year, whenever you do it. Maybe you do it a few times a year. Events are a type of fundraising. Sometimes your purpose of your event might be to collect donation, like actual goods to distribute amongst the folks you serve, or it might be to just collect money to then do with it what you might wish to do. Direct asks. So direct asks go back to communication and the importance of communication. So you might do a direct ask to folks that are included down here on the non-monetary list, your volunteers, your board members, or you might do it at any of these places listed on the monetary list, your website, your social media, your days of giving. You're doing direct asks on those things, but you might do a face-to-face direct ask at events with your friends, with your family, anybody that you come in contact with that you're talking to say, hey, here's what we do, here's our mission, here's why I think you should support us. Can you help us out with XYZ? So that's what a direct ask is. Some folks are really great at direct asks. Some folks are not so great at direct asks. Back to that, you don't have to be great at everything, but just know that that's a great way of fundraising, because when you do a direct ask, especially in person, sometimes it's really hard to say no. Think about like a salesperson. Like when you're walking in the mall and those folks who are offering like massages in the middle there, or the folks who, is it like hair care or is it like skin stuff that they're always like, excuse me, can I ask you a question? Those folks are really hard to get away from. So think about that. You don't have to be as aggressive as those folks, but direct asks can be really successful with folks that maybe cave to a little peer pressure. So non-monetary fundraising. So back to volunteers and board members. So recruiting folks who are going to believe in your mission, that want to support what you do and support the folks that you're serving. So I know we just talked about all this, but finding folks that are reflective of your community can be a challenge. I think that there are organizations that do a great job of having their board reflect the folks that they serve in having either current or former clients or folks who have experienced, if it's a housing organization, and maybe they're serving homeless folks, having somebody who was formerly homeless or somebody who's gone through those experiences so that they can bring some real accurate, timely perspective to the organization. And so that it's not a board made up of just, folks who are just checking off a tick on their resume to be a board member on a nonprofit and aren't really invested in the organization. Volunteers, you don't want to fall into a trap of just having warm bodies around. Active volunteers are a whole different thing than just a roster of folks who, again, just aren't really in it to check off back to checking off something off on their resume. So I know that some of those things are easier said than done, and this is getting into the weeds a little bit because I wouldn't expect you in your year of services VISTA to weed out all the kind of dead weight of your volunteers and your board members, but just something to keep in mind that you're going to find those unicorns who are amazing volunteers, who are amazing board members, who are reflective of your community, who are really active, who give monetary donations, who give their time, maybe don't give monetary donations, but give their time, who ask good questions, who support you. Those people are awesome. Hold on to them. Never let them go. Chain them to the desk. I'm just kidding. Anyway, so services and supplies are another non-monetary way to fundraise for your organization. So services, maybe you're an organization who could really use somebody to do your organization's taxes at tax time. You're a small organization, you need to do an audit. Your director is like, oh my gosh, how are we going to afford this? And you have a connection in the community to a CPA. Well, that's a service that can be donated. So that's a non-monetary way to fundraise. You just saved your organization $1,000 and your budget was only $20,000 to begin with. That's a great way to fundraise for your organization. Supplies. So I mentioned an Amazon wish list earlier. If you're a nonprofit organization, make sure that you're signed up for Amazon Smile. You can create a wish list and share out that wish list. Folks can order directly from there, get it shipped to your organization, share that out. That's an easy way. You can, if you're an organization that takes used items, then tell people where to take them, tell people where to bring them, tell them explicitly what you do take and what you don't take. Folks like to clean stuff out and give it away. Just make sure that you tell them exactly what you do want and exactly what you don't want. I'll go over just a couple of the graphics there. So it's hard to fundraise online on your social media sites if nobody knows where to find you. So publicize that you have a Twitter page, publicize that you have an Instagram page, that you have a Facebook page, have your board members share. Some folks really love social media. They're on it all the time. You're going to have folks that are part of your organization that are going to be really great at promoting those types of things. So ask them or have your staff or whoever it is that communicates most with the board to please share those things out. When it comes time to promote things, these are just some graphics that HHCK has put together when we were recruiting for board members to build our foundation, when we were doing a membership drive. A couple of those things are from our membership drive and about how you benefited from being a member and what you were doing for the organization and for the community when you became an HHCK member. Are there any questions about non-monetary donations or monetary donations or comments? Okay. So you got a little bit of knowledge now. You may have already had it before. That's okay. But where do you start? So start at your own site that you're going to be at this year. Do you have development staff? Are you working with folks who are already doing these things? Start there. They're going to be knowledgeable. Have they been doing this for forever? Maybe you are going to sit with them and just pick their brain and see what they want to work on, and you're going to go back to your VAD and see how does this all tie together and what can I work on. I'm going to write down these goals. I'm going to refer back and forth and make sure that I'm in line with the things I can and can't do as AmeriCorps VISTA, and it's going to be a great year. So you're going to start with your development staff. I'm curious if anybody wants to share, is willing to share. Are most of you is your supervisor like a director of development or a development coordinator, something like that, like a title like that? Does anybody want comfortable sharing?
My supervisor is COO.
Okay.
And I know she was asking as far as, is there any type of training that she can get to be more knowledgeable about what we're doing?
As far as fundraising specifically, or more?
Just the overall program.
Okay. Okay, one more question about AmeriCorps VISTA or like homeless and housing stuff.
Yes, the homeland and housing stuff. Because I have done a couple of webinars, and she was like, "I wonder why we don't have any of those." You know, so that she's really more knowledgeable about what we're doing.
Yeah. So we can definitely, if nothing else, we can connect you. We do. Let's see. We just did. Wish that I can send you, and we can send it to everybody. We do a monthly. It's kind of a combined webinar series with other Kentucky area nonprofits, but the one that we just did, it was just yesterday, was how to focus on housing. So it's usually this group is called Thrive Kentucky, and we focus on the groups that make it up are, I'm gonna miss somebody, so I'll name a few off, but it's Homeless and Housing Coalition, Kentucky Equal Justice Center, Kentucky Voices for Health, Mental Health America of Kentucky. I'm missing a whole lot of people. Feeding Kentucky. So there's Kentucky Policy.
There's Homeless and Housing Coalition of Kentucky.
Yes. So it's a way to get information, timely information out about the current climate of things, how to get access to services that are currently available. And our focus on the one that was for the month of September was housing. And we had a guest presentation from the Kentucky Housing Corporation. So I've got the recording, and I can certainly have make that available for folks. So
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So I've mentioned a little bit ago about the Kentucky Nonprofit Network, and depending on where you're located in the state, you also your organization may be associated or affiliated or a member of the Center for Nonprofit Excellence, which is in Louisville. Now, I'm going to say again, I'm sorry to say, I'm just not That's familiar. I know you Western Kentucky folks always feel like you're in a different world, and I'm sorry. I apologize. I think the Kentucky Nonprofit Network would be your go-to if you were in Western Kentucky. Um, so these two sites often offer trainings. They definitely have online resources, and you don't have to be a member to access most of those things. There's just if you are a member, if your organization is a member, they're going to be free, and some of them are free even if you aren't a member. So I would encourage you to check those sites out. Um, Sign up for any trainings, see what's available. If there is a fee for a training, does your site have a budget for you to be able to attend training this year? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I'm sorry if I've planted a seed and you're going to be irritated with me for suggesting that and your site doesn't have a budget. But in the meantime, we've said it before and I'll say it again, refer back to your VAD and your site's goals and what you're working towards. And if it's me, I'm gonna continue to write down a timeline of my goals and refer back to them as the year goes on. But because your year's just starting, then I would write them down for the next year, because you're coming up on, if your site's really heavy on fundraising, especially on monetary fundraising, you're coming up on fundraising season. It's about to be the holidays. It's a good time to be planning for how you want to handle that. COVID has really kind of thrown a wrench in things, and maybe your sites were about to do some in-person fundraising, and maybe they've walked that back again because COVID numbers are rising and it doesn't feel comfortable to do that. So they're switching back to some virtual things, or maybe they're going to do a modified kind of virtual and in person, or doing in person but scaling things back, or whatever the case may be. This is a good time to really get in kind of a planning mode and writing down timelines for goals. Any questions about this slide and Kentucky Nonprofit Network or the Center for Nonprofit Excellence? Okay. All right, so where do I start? Social media. Some people really love social media, so this might feel like it's not work at all for folks who loathe social media, and maybe that's all of us at times. It can be a really great tool. It can be a really frustrating tool. This can feel like a little bit of a challenge. JC Social Marketing, the person that I've put the link in down there at the bottom, there's not a whole lot that she offers for free. She's a consultant, but I was able to see a training of hers a few years ago, and there were some really good takeaways from hers, and some of these things came from handouts that I still have from hers. So I think that what she shared was helpful and continues to be helpful. Social media, I think, is ever changing, but some things are staying the same, and these things are. So defining your message is your first step. So back to that, what's the problem that you're trying to solve, and what solution are you providing? So don't think it's helpful if you just say, we have a problem with homelessness. Okay, well, then what? If somebody reads that, they're going to be like, well, yeah, okay. And that's it. So what's your solution to it? How can you show your community that you're trying to solve that? Or maybe it's a little more targeted. Maybe we've got a problem with folks not having access to home loans, and we're trying to get folks housed through accessibility to loans. So is that the solution? You've just done both. So you've provided your problem, you provided your solution. What's the impact? You're housing people. So how can somebody support that mission? Tell them. Be explicit. Just assume people don't know anything. baby step them how they can help your organization, but do it succinctly. You don't need to write a book. With social media, our attention spans are very quick. Define your goals. So I don't know if you've caught on yet, but I'm a big fan of writing things down. I have lots of notes scribbled everywhere. So what does social media success look like? It's going to be different for each of you. Maybe you're an organization that, back to that visibility thing, do you lack visibility? Are you just looking at this point to increase your followers so that you can really reach an audience that you don't have access to? Because that's different than needing to or wanting to increase your donors. Just write it down. Social media, sites are really easy to track what your analytics are, so you can see what your increases have been. If and you can track your successes, and maybe if you are looking stagnant, then you can adjust what your goals are or what they should be. So then define your audience. Describe 3 characteristics of your target audience. Can anybody tell me why this would be important? Why you would want to think about for your social media messages? Why you would want to think about who your target audience is?
Well, once you identify your target audience, you can more specifically advertise or appeal to them.
Yeah, right. So is your, if you've got, let's see, if you're creating a post or a graphic or something to share, and you've thought about you're creating it with the thought of your friends in mind, instead of, I don't know, maybe you're like a youth oriented organization, and you know that mostly parents are going to see it and none of your friends are parents. That message is not going to work, right? So thinking about who your target audience is really important for your message to reach the highest amount of people, the highest volume of folks that it can reach. So just like Alan said, it's important to know your audience so that you can, if you're going to do ads, which I mean, if your staff is doing ads for social media, then that's I wasn't even going to get into that today, but you can place ads to boost some posts, then that's important. So any questions about some of the, like, how to get started with creating posts or messages for social media? So storytelling goes along with social media, and I really love storytelling. It allows you to do so many things, and I could talk about this for forever, but I'm going to keep it brief. So how do you even get started with storytelling? So first, let's talk about your elevator speech that you would give talking about your organization. So you know your elevator speech because you're going to do one that to promote your site. So you've got to have one down pat when you're interacting with folks. You're going to have to, get your thoughts out within 30 seconds. So you've already done some storytelling. You already know how to do storytelling. So having an elevator speech, translate that into some social media fodder. You can do it. You've already done this. You know how to do it. So how else can you turn that storytelling into usable information to put out there for the world to see. So talk to your volunteers that are working with your site and with your clients. They've got tons of stories to tell. So talk to them. You're going to interact with them at some point. Maybe it's not something that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. It might be easier to go to your staff that are working with your volunteers to say, who do you think would be a good person for me to talk to? Or do you have a good story? Some good quotes that I could gather, that maybe I've seen this person come in a lot. They're a volunteer here. They're here every week. Do you think that they would be somebody good to talk to? Or you've seen a client that has that's come in to utilize services, and you really want to showcase them as somebody that's utilized services, maybe been a success story, which that's not everybody is going to be a success story, and that's okay. But you've got plenty of storytelling material at your sites. You can use staff as their own storyteller. You can use clients, but there are some challenges with utilizing clients. Does anybody know what poverty porn is? Anybody want to share or talk about what that might be?
I'm not entirely sure. Is it like some sort of romanticizing?
Yeah, you're on the right path.
I admit I have no idea.
Okay.
I got scared when I saw the word on the poverty.
Yeah, okay. Any other thoughts? I'll keep talking about it. So think about maybe some TV ads that you've seen, or some really like gotcha graphics that are showcasing folks in a really vulnerable position. And even the news, when they're doing stories about folks in despair. And I think homelessness is an easy target for this, right? So we see like tent cities, and we see cameras really focused on the worst of the worst and saying, this is the squalor that people are living in, and we have to make this better. And it's just taking advantage of a bad situation and saying, you need to give us money to make this person's situation better. But is that right? I mean, you can take a picture of a client who's at their lowest point and share it on social media all day long. And it's probably going to get some likes. It's probably you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I have to help this person. I can't shut my computer down today without opening up my checkbook to help this person. But is that right? Are we taking advantage of that person because we're sharing them at their lowest moment?
I understand that. I feel like that falls into the same category as the Facebook posts or social media posts you see of someone filming themselves, perhaps, pulling over and trying to rescue someone in that sense.
Yeah,
and
sure.
then sharing that.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like kind of falls into that second bullet point there, the unequal power dynamic, right? So we're taking advantage. We've got the power over someone else, and it's just not right. So it's available. I mean, you could do an image search for homelessness, and there's some images that, I mean, we as an organization wouldn't use. But that's the idea behind poverty porn. So think that there's probably some better ways to use social media to get your point across. There are going to be organizations that don't agree with that. That's okay. That's the stance that we have taken, and that's the stance that I take. So if you are in your organization and then there's images and maybe some videos or whatever that they want to share, we don't all have to agree on this, but that's where that term that poverty porn comes from. For those of you that had never seen that before, that was like you were feeling a little squeamish about it. It's just kind of sensationalizing poverty and folks that are kind of at their lowest point. So the unequal power dynamic, this is something too that we touched on it just a second ago, but maybe you want to showcase a client and you ask them, but they feel like they have to say yes because they're receiving services, and they feel like if they don't say yes, then you're going to not provide those services to them anymore. So that's where we're talking about the unequal power dynamic, because you as an organization are the entity in a power position. So it might not be great to ask a current client, but maybe you wait until they've exited your program or they're no longer receiving services, and then you ask them if they'd be willing to share their story with you, because then it's no longer there's no longer that power dynamic there anymore. Does anybody have any thoughts about that, or any comments, questions about that bullet point? Okay. Uninformed consent. So we're big proponents of consent in every sense of the word. So whether it's a former client, a current client, a staff member, a board member, get consent. Don't just snap pictures or pull quotes and put it in a social media post or an op-ed without getting the okay and or attributing those images or quotes to those people. You can get consent forms from, you could create your own. You could get on Google. If you've got an attorney on your board, they can help you. Just make sure that you get consent for these things. Becky, were you gonna?
Yeah, I was going to say, so it needs to be written consent. It can't be oral consent.
We do all of the things that we've done for our storytelling project. We've done a couple different ways. So we have a consent form that's a written consent form, but it can be read to a person that's might be on the phone. But it actually says that. It says, I've read this to the person and they have told me that they give their consent. So
Is there any way you could share your consent form?
yeah.
I've looked on Google and there's so many of them, but they all, I don't know, they're just so formal and everything, and because they're legal ones. I found one on Google, but they want you to open a PDIF and all this stuff. They want you to go through to do it. But
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I can share our and we had started out pre-COVID with a written, and that was designed to be in person, and then COVID started and we realized that we might not see people in person for a little while, so we amended it to be able to be read over the phone. So that's a good question. Any other questions about storytelling or this kind of stuff? We've got another slide about storytelling, I think. Okay. So if you're doing spoken storytelling, just some tips. And so a lot of these I think came from results.org down here. So check results.org out. There's some good, these tips up here came from there. So if you're doing spoken storytelling, 1.5 to 2 minutes tops. If you're doing like a video, if you're sharing that on social media, then like videos longer than that don't automatically play. So try to keep it in that sweet spot. If you're doing, feel like a staff member or somebody that's like maybe a board member who's going to cite sources and statistics, or sorry, it's going to share statistics, then cite your sources so that you don't sound like you're sharing misinformation, kind of one of those bad videos. Those are helpful. I think this was really important. If you think, I love this one. This is such a great tip. Provide the background info. Set the scene. Can you imagine how impactful it would be if you've got somebody who is telling you where they were, like what it smelled like, what it tasted like, just what the air was like. I mean, that to me just feels, if I were listening to that, to somebody tell me what their experience was like, and they got as detailed as that, I would be hooked. I thought that was a really good tip for storytelling. Remember to present challenges, but also share successes. And that can feel sometimes that feels a little because not everybody has successes to share, right? Not everybody's going to go from homeless to housed the way that I think our society wants to see them. And we don't have successes always in the way that society defines success. So that can be difficult sometimes. But I would also want to emphasize that success can look the way we want to define success as well. So if you've got somebody that maybe was utilizing services and is no longer utilizing them, and they were able to find success the way that they define success, then celebrate that. And just remember, I guess that's my main point, is that success can be whatever it is. It doesn't have to be the way our society defines success. I like this alternative too, if you're not doing a video, that this 6-word story with a picture can be a really fun activity. I say fun, maybe it would be miserable for some people, but it was an interesting activity to do. If you try to tell a story in 6 words, it is challenging, but it can be so impactful. So if you start out like with one line, give yourself one line to tell a story, and then you cut it down to 6 words, it's a pretty interesting activity. But you can come up with a pretty amazing story in 6 words. And I would challenge you, if we were in person, I would have had all of us do this, and you'd be surprised with yourself, I think, with what you would come up with in 6 words to tell a story. So I'm going to talk about pictures just real second. So not just Canva, but if you are an organization who feels like you're never going to get the consent from somebody to take their picture, I like to use domestic violence shelters as an example, which I don't think we have anybody here from a DV shelter, but folks from DV shelters are usually say that we can't do that. There's a safety issue, there's a safety concern. But no, there's nothing that says that you have to take a full-on headshot of a survivor for it to be a good picture. You can take the picture from behind. You can take the picture of a silhouette of that person. You can take a picture of just like half of their body. You can get really creative. If you're somebody who's creative and you enjoy photography, you know that there are other options besides taking a picture of somebody's face. And to go along with the 6-word story, it can be really, it can do a lot. But if you still can't get pictures of actual people, you can use Canva. Canva's great. As a nonprofit, a lot of your sites, your organizations may already be using Canva. So I might be telling you things that you already know or that you're already utilizing, but Canva does things for you. You can search pictures, you can use stock photos, use them as a nonprofit. You get access to Canva Pro for free after an application. I think I'll say that later on in this presentation, so I'll say it again. You do not want to go searching Google for stock pictures, because eventually whoever owns that picture is going to come after you. So don't go looking on the internet just for any picture and copy it and paste it to share on your organization's page. It's not a good thing. Yes, it does happen that the owner of that picture will come after you, especially if it's like a Getty Images, like a big company that owns that picture. They will find you. I'm not kidding. Don't do that. Get your pictures from Canva or another site that you're paying for. It's just how it is. Any questions about storytelling, pictures, anything that we just talked about? Okay. Okay, events. Where to start? So there, I think like the typical language about events is that there are 3 types of events: large, medium, or small. But really, I think events can fall into these 3 categories. Annual events with returning audiences. So think about in your community or in your town, the organizations that have annual events that bring in folks that are always talking about it, that look forward to those events. Like the galas, and the even like just casual events that folks enjoy going to. Then you've got community events. Those might encompass more than one nonprofit and are a little bit smaller than the big events, but bigger than small events. And then you've got info events that exist truly to only get info out to folks who are going to benefit from services provided by your organization. So how many events is too many events? This is, if you talk to any event planner, I think you're going to hear something different. I think that most folks in development are going to say that you don't want to do more than 2 events. But I've worked for organizations, well, just one organization, that I think that they did an event at like once a month or once every 6 weeks, and it was a lot, and it was too many. So and most of those were fundraising type events where things were sold, money, the purpose was for money to be raised. So it just depends on what. I wouldn't expect you all to have much say in how many events your organization holds over the next year, but just something to keep in mind as you're moving forward. So the common theme of what's important at these events is your ability to connect, to sell, to kind of be a salesperson, to give that elevator speech, to tell stories. Those are the things that matter. Just being able to start a conversation, to ask folks how they're doing, to share information about your organization, about what your mission is, about your purpose, about why you're there, about why you care about what you're doing, about why you care about your community, and why you want to be there, and why you think folks should participate, and whatever it is. And that goes for all of those events. That works at info events, that works for those medium-sized community events, and that works at those big events. Do other things help? They can, sure. And we'll talk about those things. Any questions about this page or comments? Okay. We've talked about this, I think, throughout the morning, that probably the biggest thing that can help is planning. So with events, you're going to want to set a budget and a goal for what you want to raise, or maybe how many folks you want to talk to. Are you going to get sponsors? Are you looking for donations? And donations can be like, are you having a silent auction where you're going to need items for your silent auction? Well, that kind of stuff takes time. It takes planning. It takes putting together letters. It takes putting together thank yous. So you're putting out flyers. Different flyers are going to be needed for different types of events. You're not going to have the same flyer at an info event that you probably are at a formal event. So planning ahead. Sign up sheets can be really helpful. They're pretty basic. I mean, that's kind of a starting point. But if you're going back to that, to your VAD, if you're an organization that's looking to increase your visibility, do you just need to collect email addresses and mailing addresses so that you can actually have some folks to connect to? Then sign-up sheets are going to be gold at events like this. It's going to be worth your time to do as many info events, as many small events as you can, just to get your name out there. So swag can be literally anything. You can just have candy. Candy counts as swag. It's cheap. People love it. They will stop by your table at a resource fair. They will stop by your table literally anywhere to get a piece of candy. It never fails. They're also going to stop by your table to get expensive things. But does your organization have that budget? Maybe not. You don't have to have those things. Think about your own experience when you've gone to maybe like a resource fair, and there's been tons of tables with free giveaway stuff. And if you're like me, there for a long time I'd want to get everything that I could, and then eventually I had a million like bags and pins, and I don't know what else was always popular, but I just gave it away because there was too much stuff. I didn't have a home for it anymore. So eventually people get tired of the same stuff because most organizations give the same stuff, and candy works better. I think something good to have, if folks want to be able to give to you no matter where you are, is to have the ability to take donations and to give a thank you on the spot. Include your organization's tax ID number, because inevitably, even if it's just an info fair, folks are going to want to be able to give you money. And you do it enough times when you're not prepared, then you remember to be prepared. So got the same thing here. What's most important at each of these events, no matter the size or what type of event it is your ability to connect, sell your mission, tell stories. Any questions about these? Comments too? Okay. So online giving, kind of the same as events. The only thing I think that's a little bit different is just that so far in advance and everything's online that you can schedule like social media posts, and oftentimes you will have graphics. So if you're a member of Kentucky Nonprofit Network, they send you graphics, and you can utilize, you can change those graphics, you can edit them, you can add the logo, and you can just be ready. You don't have to rush around to get your post ready to go that day. Just be done with it. The thing that is similar that I should have added to the other slide about events is board involvement. So include your board in both in-person events and online events. Ask them to connect to their network of folks. Ask them to share things on social media, ask them to do their direct asks to the folks that they know. And they are good folks, again, to take pictures with and get stories about why they give. That's helpful too. And don't forget thank you cards and notes. You can personalize them for your online day of giving. And usually online day of giving, the ones that are organized by other organizations like the Kentucky Nonprofit Network, they are done on an outside software platform. So it's very easy to personalize the thank you, so you don't have to do a whole lot on your own. But if it's like a Giving Tuesday, which is after Black Friday and Cyber Monday and whatnot, if you're promoting that kind of day of giving, then you'll have to personalize your thank yous, internally. Any questions about online days of giving? Okay, volunteer recruitment. We did talk about this a little bit earlier. I think some of these are just kind of like just things to remember. So volunteers are people, and don't forget their needs, but don't forget your needs too. Don't let volunteers run your life. Like, some folks can do that. What are their needs? Or I'm sorry, what are your volunteer needs? Do you need one-time volunteers, or do you need ongoing volunteers? So maybe some of your organizations are going to have like a day where you just really need to knock out some kind of, like, you got some painting projects, and it would be awesome if you had a big group of volunteers to get those things done just all at once. If you could connect with a group who could supply like 15 volunteers and get everything done in a day or a weekend, you would be good for a while. You wouldn't need anybody else. So those are different needs than if you need folks to help transport clients to and from appointments like once a week. Completely different needs. So you got to recognize what your needs are, because that's going to depend on where you recruit. If you're looking for one-time volunteers, businesses often do, like larger businesses often do planned events, planned days of volunteers. So you might look at your larger, well, I'd say mid-sized to larger businesses, and even some of your smaller ones too in your community, and call them, email them, ask, does your company do volunteer time? Here's what our needs are. Again, I think I said this earlier, spell it out. If you're going to kind of cold call or cold email, whatever, a business like that, spell everything out. Don't make them come back to you to ask a follow-up question, unless it's, yes, what time can we show up? So put it all out there in the first correspondence. So ask if they do those days of volunteerism, and tell them what you're looking for and how many volunteers you need. And also, maybe you need some ongoing volunteers, and this is what your ongoing volunteer needs are. So for some recruitment, use what you already have, your social media, your direct mail, email, board of directors, your existing donors, business contacts, and school groups. Don't forget to thank your folks. Time is oftentimes the biggest entity that people have to give. And so with our volunteers who are giving their time, don't forget to thank them. But how big does the thank you need to be? Does it need to be, do you need to buy them something? Does your organization need to get them the swag that we were talking about you're giving away at events? Probably not. A lot of volunteers really just want a thank you. If you do volunteer appreciation days, where maybe and this might be different with COVID, where you're doing like get-togethers or potluck or even like a gift card. If that's a once a year thing, that's great. It might not be in your budget. So the biggest thing is to do a thank you, and a personalized thank you can be great. If you if you call, if your staff is calling to say thank you, or texting, or emailing personal emails, doesn't really fall in that category. Email's not really personal. So just don't forget to thank your volunteers. Any questions about volunteer recruitment or comments? Okay. Okay, direct mail. This one's been around for a long time. So again, I would expect most of your organizations to do some kind of direct mail fundraising. Defining your audience is pretty big. So you don't want to use acronyms if you're talking to, if your audience are is made up mostly of folks who are not super familiar with your with the ins and outs of maybe just housing. There are tons of acronyms in housing. Excuse me. So spell things out, or maybe just don't use them, take them out. But if you're doing a direct mail to lots of industry folks who are in the housing world, then use acronyms. That's totally okay. Don't forget to define your message, be clear and concise, define your problem, propose your solution, and tell folks how they can help. So graphic design, if nothing else, use Canva. Canva is fantastic. You can even order directly from Canva your printed items. And I always think about what you get from your, like, in your mailbox and what you see from other organizations. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just look at what you have. What catches your eye? Copy those things. I mean, don't, like, not like verbatim, like, but just like look at what is pretty, look at what catches your eye, and you can do the same kinds of things. And don't forget the power of a thank you. Doesn't have to be big, but just don't forget to do it. Any questions about direct mail or any comments? Okay. So here is the list of some resources, and I would preface it with saying find what works best for your organization. If you're working with development folks, then chances are they're using what works best. But here are a few. Maybe if you're trying to find some things that you like better, or that are free, and most of these are free. So that was my goal in sharing these. So Canva, again, Canva Pro is free for nonprofits after you do an application. MailChimp is very affordable if you do pay for some things. There are some tiered levels. So as you're sharing things on social media, there's maybe you've got like a huge long web address, and it just, like, you can't share that long of a web address. So you want to shorten it. So tiny URL works, but it doesn't give you any data on how many folks are clicking your URL. But if it's something that doesn't really matter, you're not worried about it, tiny URL works great. But Bitly will give you excuse me, some data on your clicks. But I think there's a free trial, but then it isn't free any longer. So QR codes, who knew that we were going to be a year and a half into COVID? The QR codes were going to be how we do life now. So there are about 80,000 sites that offer QR codes. There are a lot of free ones, but they kind of get you sucked in saying they're free, but then they expire after like 30 or even 60 days. So just beware that some of them are free for only a limited time. But then there are the one that we've got there in the slide. That one is free. It just kind of like the tiny URL and the bit.ly, it does not give you data on how many times it is utilized. So just want to remember there's some give and take with what you're going to find. So that's why I say you need to find what works best for your organization and kind of weigh the pros and cons. There are a ton of resources, and when all else fails, just use Google and type in what you're looking for, and you will definitely get some options. And just take the time to research, and that's really what it takes, is just some time. Any questions about these resources that are listed here? And you'll have access to this after the presentation. And then, are there any questions in general or about anything that we want to go back to, anything that I can clarify or expand on, or anything that you all want to ask each other?
Is anyone here actually directly involved with fundraising as part of their VAD?
I am, but through Day of Forgiving.
Okay. I was just curious because I know we all we vary quite a bit here, so I was just curious.
Any other questions or for each other? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I can always go back. And I think we're right at noon. Caitlin, is there anything else I can go over? Anything else I can share?
I don't think so. I really appreciate your time today. And I know I learned some new stuff, even though I've worked in this, nonprofit sector for a while. So I hope you all took something away from this presentation. And Whitney, again, she does work for HHCK. I know she'd be happy to talk with you one-on-one if you had any specific situations or questions you had. Another just reminder, we'll put this recording up on YouTube if you want to refer to it later, and we'll put the slides on our website. And so I'll send those links out again so you have those. And I guess my ask to you all, as you go through the next few days, if there's any sort of specific training you'd like to have from HHCK related to your VISTA position, or anything you'd like to learn more about during your year, we are always accepting thoughts on that. We sit here and try and think of what would be helpful for you all, but we're not the ones, with boots on the ground right now like you all are. So feel free to share what you'd like to see this year with us, and we'd love to get that started for you. So again, thank you, Whitney. Thank you all for joining. Don't forget to log this time on your timesheets, and we will talk to you all soon.
Thanks, Whitney. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
You all have a great day. Stay corona free.